Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL, Google's very AI-centric new premium handset. Let's get into the review. So in prior years, if you were buying a Pixel Pro phone, you had a choice of one size precisely. It was the big phone. But Google hasn't gone down that path this year, instead choosing to make the Pixel 9 Pro in two different sizes. So you've got the 6.8-inch Pixel 9 Pro XL, and then you've got the 6.3-inch Pixel 9 Pro. And this is not the Pixel 9 Pro, this is just the Pixel 9, but I'm holding it up because it gives a fairly good estimation of the sizing differences between the two. And the thing about the sizing differences there that I really do like, I think this is a really smart design decision on Google's part, is that the only difference between the 9 Pro XL and the 9 Pro is the screen size and the battery capacity. Otherwise, identical phones, same processors, same RAM, same cameras. I love that. I like a smaller, more powerful phone, if I'm honest. But the big one is what I'm reviewing right now. Google's always had a little bit of fun with its color choices over the years. That's true this year too. You do still get porcelain and obsidian if you like white or black phones, but there's also hazel and rose quartz, which is what I'm holding, and yeah, it sure is pink. Not 100% to my taste, to be honest with you, but then that's what phone cases are for, and I think everyone knows what's coming because I'm a fanatic for phone cases, and Google did send me one for review. There is not a phone case in the box, so if you'll just give me a second. So much better. And so much less pink, but that's a taste call, and I'm sure there'll be third-party cases as well. But a case is still a sensible investment, even though Google claims that this phone is twice as durable as its predecessor. It's an interesting claim. I mean, it's IP68 for water resistance, same as the Pixel 8 Pro was. There's no such thing as IP138 if it was going to be double that way. It's got Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the front. It's a solid enough and durable phone. No, I haven't hit it with a sledgehammer and hit a Pixel 8 Pro with a sledgehammer to see which one cracks first, because as I've detailed previously, that kind of stuff is generally just destruction porn, not proper testing. So we'll have to wait and see on exactly how durable it is. I would still buy a case anyway. It'll just keep the phone looking a bit better, and if you do happen to want to sell or trade it in down the track, you'll get a bit more for it if it's in better nick. It's a very simple, cheap insurance, basically. Of course, the big change for the Pixel 9 Pro XL is the change in the camera bar. So we've gone from having a camera bar ridge that ran the entire way across the back of the phone to one that is more of this kind of pill, or being pedantic, maybe stadium shape. This rounded edges, sides, basically, of a rectangle. There's various names for that. And look, it's okay. I don't mind it. It doesn't offend me. Some people really didn't like the camera bar and might love this. Others might have loved the camera bar. It doesn't affect the functionality of the phone to speak of. You've still got a fairly prominent ridge there, which can be handy depending on how you're holding it for photography. A 6.8-inch phone, of course, is a big beast in the hand, so having that ridge there can be handy sometimes. On the camera front, the Pixel 9 Pro packs in a 50 megapixel wide camera, 48 megapixel ultra wide camera, and 48 megapixel 5x optical zoom telephoto lens at the back, plus a 42 megapixel front facing selfie camera. And look, this is a phone where the camera story really has two halves. There's the camera hardware, and then there's the AI that Google throws into it. So I'm going to deal with the camera hardware first. And look, honestly here, I have very, very few complaints. So that front-facing selfie camera, for example, takes perfectly good selfies. They're quite nice, even if I'm not the world's best photographic subject for them. I like what it does. It takes them really sharply and well, lots of editing options. I could have wished for the return of that whole dual lens thing that had a few pixels back, so you could do group selfies a bit more easily, but this is quite a nice selfie-taking camera. On the telephoto front, you get native 5x or up to 30x super res zoom in Google parlance, and I'll show that off here with a shot of a fountain near my local shopping centre. So here's the ultra-wide shot, which is okay. The wide shot, as you might expect, is probably the pick of the bunch because most phone makers tend to put their best efforts into making their standard camera, the one that takes the nicest shots, has the lowest light pickup and all of those kinds of things. The next step up, you can of course slide up, but the next step up in Google's camera app is 2 times, and that works quite well. And then you get 5 times, and that also works quite well because again, it's all optical, it's all good. At 30 times, yeah, look, there's some problems here for sure. To be honest, Google's stabilization, because these were all handheld shots, is actually a bit better than most, but 30 times by itself, and I'll qualify that in a minute, is not something that I would say you'd want to do a lot of the time if you want really particularly pleasing photos. What about low light performance? Well, I've done a complete separate video on the low light performance of this phone, which I would encourage you to go and watch. I'm not going to drop the whole thing in here, so please go and click on that link in the description below. It should also pop up on the screen if YouTube is playing nicely with me. The practical side there is this is a decent low light performer, not quite the best in class, however. Google's AI-led post-processing for low-light video is quite impressive in its own way, but that is a slow process. It does involve uploading stuff to the cloud. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here on the AI side of things. Look, generally, this is quite a pleasing hardware camera. I actually quite like it as a hardware camera. I would probably opt for the smaller 9 Pro just because I find those smaller phones a little easier to hold, a little easier to frame. I don't find the benefits of having the larger screen for framing outweigh the fact that I'm holding a bit of a chunky beast in my hands when I'm taking photos, but there's nothing wrong with that if that suits your photographic style. But of course, that's only part of the story, because then there's AI. And look, Google has actually had AI in its phones from day one of Pixel. The way it got by having a single lens in that first Pixel phone was because everything was post-processed. Everything was run through a version of AI to make the photos better. And here, it's a bit of a mixed story. So let's take that 30 times super res zoom shot. And I'll throw that up on the screen again so you can see what that one looks like. Because one of the features that they've got this year is what's called zoom enhance. And this uses AI to try and sharpen up zoomed in photos. But does it work? Well, the short answer is yes. Yeah, it really does. I mean, the difference between those two photos is quite remarkable. This worked really, really well. Won't necessarily work for absolutely every shot, and obviously you've got to be happy with letting your photos into Google's magical rendering engine. But yeah, this on the AI side, I was quite impressed with. The other headline AI feature, though, for photos specifically, is what's called Reimagine. And this lets you take a photo and just reimagine an aspect of it using AI to fill in the gaps. So it's kind of a hybrid of generative AI images and the photos that you've already taken. And I'm not a big fan. The results I'm seeing are not great. So, for example, again, at my local shopping centre, I took a photo of this little Peppa Pig ride-on kids ride thing. She's obviously seen a bit of wear and tear, probably a few kids clambering over her, and I thought, well, Peppa might look nice with a hat on. So I asked Reimagine to add some hats to the pigs. That was the exact phrase that I used. So I went from this to this. No kid should be riding on that, and honestly, that pig's not even wearing that hat, really. It's not good. It's so obviously artificial, and it just looks janky in all sorts of kind of slightly horrifying ways. But maybe I'm being unfair to Reimagine, because a ride-on car thing with some plastic pigs on the back, going to pigs with hats, maybe that's a step too far, and I'm pushing too far on what AI can do. So I chose a simpler target. This is my cat Neko. Lots of you have been asking for more cats in my videos, so here is Neko. And Neko is a bit of a coward, honestly, but he thinks of himself as a mighty lion, as so many household cats do. So I asked Reimagine to say, well, okay, what if he was a lion? Please turn his cat into a lion. Let's just say that I have regrets, many, many regrets. This is awful. Let's be honest here. This is awful. This is not good. Reimagine has not impressed me so far. And obviously, it's an AI model. It could get better, but right now it's not particularly good. And that leaves the Pixel 9 Pro XL in a really odd position, because I like its camera hardware generally. I think it's nicely flexible, and generally speaking, for everyday photo taking, it works quite well. Low light performance could be a little bit better, especially considering the higher price that Google is asking for these phones this year. But beyond that, it's a very, very capable device. On the AI side, though, I'm nowhere near as convinced as Google is. On the performance front, the Pixel 9 Pro XL and Pixel 9 Pro, and indeed the Pixel 9, are all built on Google's new Tensor G4 processor. And for the Pro phones, you also get 16 gig of RAM and between 128 gig up to 1 terabyte of storage. I should note for Australian watchers that for whatever reason, Google's not offering the Pixel 9 Pro in its 1 terabyte form here. It's definitely a phone that exists in other markets, but we're not getting it for some reason. If you are cashed up enough, though, you can get the 9 Pro XL in a 1 terabyte version, and as is always the case with Pixel phones, these are sealed storage units, so there's no microSD expansion. I could wish that they put it there, but of course they want you to pay for cloud storage, although there's a mild silver lining, which I'll get to in a minute there. Now, Tensor is built around Samsung's Exynos platform, although in this case, because of the way they've re-engineered it, it very much is its own CPU beast. And typically this is where I would dive into some benchmarks to get some comparative performance figures going. But there's a problem here, and it's not a new problem either. And the problem here is that Google plays silly buggers with benchmarks for the first month of any new Pixel release, stating that popular benchmarks like Geekbench and 3D Mark are not available for Pixel phones. And, well, liar, liar, pants on fire, Google. This is just, it's not the case. I have absolute confidence that this is not an issue of, oh, it's a new architecture and the app doesn't cover for it. No. It really isn't the case. And how can I have that kind of confidence? Well, because of the Pixel 8a, frankly. Now, that's a phone that was built on the Tensor G3 architecture, found in the Pixel 8 and Pixel 8 Pro, and when the Pixel 8a came out, you could fully benchmark the 8 and 8 Pro phones, no problems. But the 8a said, oh, no, it's not available. Same architecture, the app clearly works. And in years gone past, I've just gone, all right, fine, I'll just have to wait and do observational stuff instead. My patience has worn thin with Google's games here, so I did sideload these apps. Now, I have to put an asterisk on the figures that I got as a result, whilst I have taken every effort to try and ensure that the benchmarks are identical because they're the right app versions. There is a slight risk there with sideloading. For my written review, link in the description below, I will update those figures once I can actually run the full benchmarks through Google Play, which, let's be honest, will be about 3 to 4 weeks from now. If I could edit a YouTube video and drop that table in, I would, but whoever it is that owns YouTube won't let me do that kind of editing. If only I knew who it was that owned YouTube. But I digress. And the important thing here really is that Google's pricing for these phones is now on par with what Samsung charges for an S24 Ultra or Apple charges for an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max phone in their respective sizes. There's no real price difference, so you want to see performance that's right up there, don't you? Well, here's how the Pixel 9 Pro XL compares using Geekbench 6's CPU test. In a word, oof. I mean, even allowing for the fact that it's sideloaded, oof. This is not great. Kind of expected. Tensor has always run a bit slower than its competitors, but that's when Google wasn't charging quite so much for Tensor-based phones. What we're really talking here, while it is an improvement on the Pixel 8 Pro, and you'd expect that, is the performance of something like a Motorola Think phone, and that's not a good look for a phone in this price bracket. But maybe it's better on the GPU front. So how does that work with, again, a side-loaded version of 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme benchmark? Again, not superb. Now, I'm not drawing too much there out of the fact that the Pixel 9 beat the Pixel 9 Pro there, by the way. It's the same architecture. You'd expect that the additional RAM in the Pro phones actually will give them a certain performance edge with a lot of apps. And obviously, if you're multitasking or switching between things or apps are misbehaving and keeping RAM, you've got a lot more headroom there. But still, you can get phones with much better performance for this kind of money, and I do think that's a problem for Google. But that's not where the problems stop. As with the Pixel 8 Pro, you get the promise of 7 years of OS upgrades and security updates and Pixel feature drops, which is lovely to see. However, there are two catches here. One, Samsung is essentially, outside the Google Pixel drops, of course, doing the same thing with its Galaxy S phones. So, that's a like-for-like situation on a phone that's, again, more powerful. And for whatever reason, well, for the reason presumably that the software isn't ready yet, The Pixel 9 Pro XL is the first Pixel phone not to launch with a new version of Android. You might expect as 2024's Pixel phone that this was going to launch with Android 15. It doesn't. It's an Android 14 phone at launch. And it's not exactly clear where Google's commitment lies here, because you could read that 7-year figure to say, well, that doesn't matter because Android 15 is this year's version, so it will see up to Android 22, but it could be that 7 years means 7 OS upgrades, and that could mean it only goes to 21, which is less than optimal. The Pixel 9 Pro XL is a 5G capable phone, and in prior years I'd really championed the Pixel line because here in Australia they were the only phones, the Pixel Pro ones were the only ones that did full 5G, that is sub 6 GHz and mmWave. If you wanted mmWave, and yes, the coverage of mmWave in Australia is not extensive, but if you wanted it, it was the only way to get it. It's the only phone that had it. Samsung and Apple and other providers do make mmWave capable phones, but they sure as heck do not sell them in Australia. So the Pixel 9 Pro, it's a mmWave phone, right? No. Wrong. And when I say wrong, I mean Google, you've done us wrong. Now there are a whole bunch of variants of the Pixel 9 Pro across the planet, 5 in total I believe, but only one of them, the US model, is mmWave capable. Everyone else misses out. And I think that's truly regrettable. The Pixel phones are meant to be market leaders. They're meant to have cutting-edge tech, and this doesn't. It's taken a retrograde step. The best mmWave phone in Australia is the Pixel 8 Pro. And I've got to think, Google is only saving probably a few cents per chip on not including mmWave here, and leaving us with phones that are less capable. I can't get behind that. For what it's worth, testing on the Telstra network, I got my typical between 200 to 400 meg down, testing in Sydney on 5G. That's what I get out of every sub-6 phone, basically. I can get that out of a $300 sub-6 gig phone. So this is nothing special anymore, and yeah, that makes me sad. Something that could make you happy, I guess, although I'd really love some viewer feedback on this one, is that the Pixel 9 Pro XL still has the temperature sensor in it. And, yeah, it measures temperature. Has anyone worked out a really good use case for this? Because I'm struggling. You could check boiling water, but then you're risking the phone getting steam in it, and dropping the phone in boiling water would be a really, really bad idea. You could do a rough-ish sort of human temperature measurement thing, but I'd probably stick with a thermometer. I don't quite get why it's there. I would rather have, frankly, Google, if we're talking hardware, cut the thermometer, give me the mmWave back. I'd be much, much happier with something that I might actually use every once in a while. And then, of course, we come to the AI side of the equation. And the big story here is Google's Gemini Advanced AI. You get basic Gemini, of course, on this phone, but you get Gemini on a bunch of phones not made by Google these days, so that's nothing special. Gemini Advanced is Google's more conversational, more computationally powerful AI. It's meant to be able to take context into consideration when you're searching for data or trying to find things out. And so far, yeah, my results with it have been a bit mixed here and there for both serious and silly queries. I think nearly everyone does a silly query to an AI every once in a while because it's kind of fun to do. I did hit issues, though, where Gemini Advanced struggled with my accent, even though things like the Google Recorder app would actually correct for them very quickly. Gemini Advanced seems to take a bit longer to work out what it is I'm trying to say, and if it gets it wrong, it'll get off track fast, and then I've got to restate my question, and that's a bit of a pain. There is a bigger pain point here, though, and it's the fact that while Gemini Advanced is available to Pixel 9 Pro and 9 Pro XL users, it's not free. It's not part of the package, strictly speaking. What you get with these phones is a 12-month subscription to Gemini Advanced AI. And the sweetener there is you also get 2 terabytes of Google Cloud storage. That I very much like. That I will very much use. Thank you very much. However, when that 12 months is up, it's going to cost you $32.99 Australian to continue using Gemini Advanced. Oh, and that's not per year, that's per month. So while you could take the glass half full approach of saying, well, that's several $100s off the cost of the phone because I'm getting the Gemini AI Advanced on my account for a year. Yeah, that's true, that's fair. On the longer term view, if you want to keep using it, if it has utility for you, and it will have utility for some, it's just going to cost you month in, month out. And I'm not a big fan of that approach. It makes me genuinely concerned about what we will see in smartphones moving forward, because if more of these features start to get pushed towards subscription AI platforms, then suddenly you're buying the phone, but you're also paying to use the features of the phone that you want to use on a rolling basis. Suddenly phone ownership gets a whole lot more expensive. And I get that AI data centers are not cheap. I get that the power use and computational use has an absolute cost. I'm not necessarily saying this should be free. I will sound a note of caution, though, that I'm not sure that I want to see a whole bunch of features offloaded to it. And right now, I don't think Gemini Advanced is quite smart enough or evolved enough to be worth that $33 asking price. You also get Pixel Studio, which is your essential image generation via AI thing. Google says it's using partially the onboard NPU and partially its own Imagen 3 cloud platform to create images. For the end user, I don't know that that matters that much. You've got to have a data connection to use it anyway, and it's not as though it feels like it's lightning fast. You can't really tell when it's using on-device or when it's using the cloud. But there's a bigger problem. You can probably see this one coming if you've used any generative AI image feature anywhere, really, because the results just aren't that great. And look, I'll throw up an example here. So a number of years ago, I wrote a deliberately trashy B-movie novel called Sharksplosion, about exploding sharks, if that wasn't obvious. And I paid someone to make a suitably trashy cover. An actual human made a suitably trashy cover. Here it is. It's nothing special. I'm not saying this is artistically great. That was very much the point, really, because it was meant to be evocative of, trashy B-movies and so on. So that's the human-produced cover. And I thought, well, okay, I could get Pixel Studio to make me a new cover for this book. Maybe it needs a new cover. Maybe it'll refresh sales. I'll leave some sales links if you don't want to see what a trashy exploding shark novel is like, by the way. Subtle plug-ins there. But getting back on the point, I asked Pixel Studio to make me some covers, and this is what it did. Yeah. And by yeah, in that typical Australian way, I mean nah. Because there's some problems there. I mean, that leftmost one, I can't quite work out if that shark is swimming both in the water, because there's light rays coming from above, and above the water, or if that's meant to be the ocean floor, but then it looks like there might be a little surf in there. That middle one, it's garbled the title. All three of them have weird added text for reasons I can't quite work out. The rightmost one's probably the best of them, but then the tail's all weird. I really don't like it. Now, some of Google's AI-led approaches do have some merit. The screenshots facility, which lets you kind of create a database around your screenshots in a more controlled way than you can, say, with Microsoft Recall. Yeah, that's potentially got some utility down the track. But look, while AI has room to grow and evolve, and this might be a very different phone in 12 months' time, I always say buy on what a phone can do when you get it, because you don't know when those new features are coming. And right now, yeah, AI is not a big consumer reason, I feel, to buy this particular phone. On the battery front, Google bucks the trend, because this doesn't have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery in it. Neither does the smaller 9 Pro. The smaller 9 Pro has a 4,700 milliamp hour battery, and the 9 Pro XL has a 5,060 milliamp hour battery. Ooh, 60 extra milliamp hours. That's going to make a big difference to battery life, right? Well, look, probably not, let's be honest here, because battery life figures that vendors state are always typical averages. The way they're manufactured means there can be variance between individual batteries in phones, if you weren't aware of that. This is basically a 5,000 milliamp hour battery phone, but the smaller 9 Pro is not. And I was curious to see what that would mean for battery life, because one of the good features of Tensor phones I've found in years past is the battery life has generally been very good in my testing, both in my standardized testing and in day-to-day usage. So first of all, I'll turn to my YouTube battery test, which is 1 hour of 1080p video playback at maximum brightness, moderate volume from a fully charged battery. And I'll put that up against the same crop of phones that I tested for Geekbench and 3D Mark, and here's how the Pixel 9 Pro XL compares. Those are some pretty good figures, and it's worth noting that the Pixel 9 figure I've got there is probably what you'd see out of the 9 Pro as well, because Same size phone, same size battery, same processor platform. But of course, video is a slightly softer test there. It's pleasing to see though, because even though every phone in the premium category in this test does fairly well, anything under 90%, by the way, there is a bit of a fail. The fact that it is top of the tree is not just mathematically significant. That should lead to longer battery life over the course of a day, or maybe over the course of a couple of days. Obviously, this all depends on your usage. In my testing over a week and a half or so, it's easily lasted a day, except on days where I really deliberately pushed it hard, shooting a lot of video and taking a lot of photos for camera testing, for example. Did run it down, as you might expect. As is the trend with modern flagships, there's no charger in the box with the Pixel 9 Pro XL. It will charge at up to 45 watts wired, and Google does have a charger to that effect. And it'll do Qi wireless charging. Here I'm a little disappointed, because Google again could have led the pack and offered Qi 2, but it didn't, which basically means we're not going to see a Qi 2 phone in wide circulation, maybe something for the China market perhaps, but we're not going to see a Qi 2 phone in wide circulation this year on the Android side of the fence. I feel like that's a missed opportunity. Don't know why Google didn't go for it, but I guess I'm wishlisting there. It at least does charge via wireless if that's what you want. So, should you buy the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL? Well, look, this is a phone that does have its good points. The camera hardware is generally very good. The battery life is best in class for a flagship phone right now. And if you really love AI and you are already integrating it into your workflow, then yeah, there's a lot going on here, and that 12 months of Gemini Advanced could be a huge value to you that you were going to spend anyway, so you're saving money there and sort of getting a cheaper phone. However, a big part of the reason why I've always been keen on Google's Pixel phones is because they price them really competitively. They were flagship phones at a less than flagship price, hundreds of dollars cheaper than what Apple or Samsung were offering at the same point in time, and that's just no longer the case. And as soon as you put them side to side, there are problems. The CPU power and GPU power is the obvious one here. If you can get a more powerful phone, why wouldn't you? And you might think, well, but this runs apps okay, Alex. You're being pedantic about benchmarks again. I'm not. Because over that 7-year span of updates, for example, this is going to seem like a slower phone relative to, for example, the S24 Ultra, and that's seeing 7 years of updates too. I'd go for that phone over this one if processing power and graphics power matter to you. And there are other competitors in that field. I'm using Samsung because they're very widely available and sell a whole lot of phones. The AI side of things outside of Gemini, I'm a little bit less than sold on. Zoom Enhance, genuinely very good, but pretty much everything generative tends to devolve into horror shows still. And yes, of course, AI is getting better all the time, and maybe in a year or 2 or 3, what Reimagine can do will seem magical, and I will get my hats on Peppa Pig and all that kind of stuff, but right now, I'm not seeing it. And that does leave me in a situation where I loved the Pixel 8 Pro. I thought that was an excellent phone. This is merely a very good phone, and at that price, it's a little bit harder to recommend. So that's my take on the Pixel 9 Pro XL. Hit me up in the comments section below, and as always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe.